photography is strictly prohibited. No food, drink, or gum is permitted in the auditorium. For your safety, take a moment to locate the nearest emergency exit. Thank you, and enjoy the performance.
evening, everyone. And thank you for attending my lecture recital, The Uncommon Woman, Female Advocacy and Activism in Wind Band Music. What you just heard was Joan Tower's 5th fanfare for The Uncommon Woman, inspired by one of Aaron Copland's most famous pieces, Fanfare for the Common Man. Tower composed a series of fanfares for The Uncommon Woman, which was not only dedicated to pioneering conductor Maren Alsop, but written for women who take risks and are adventurous. Tower's work reframes a traditional ceremonial fanfare historically associated with masculine heroism into a powerful musical statement honoring women. It was immediately embraced as a historic feminist statement in music and helps frame the purpose of tonight's lecture recital. Composers have pushed the boundaries of how we engage in social and political environments. However, we often overlook the contributions of women composers who use music to advocate for political issues. For example, during the women's suffrage movement from 1848 to 1920, female composers used music to challenge systemic exclusion, shape public opinion, and assert women's rightful place in both political and artistic fields. Women continued to voice their experiences of marginalization in society throughout the 20th century, challenging social norms and advocating for change, even when their perspectives were often excluded from public discourse. And even today, we are still actively working towards gender equity in the career field of music. Before the 1900s, women musicians faced significant systemic barriers that limited their participation in public musical life. Traditionally male-dominated spaces, such as symphony orchestras and academic institutions, frequently excluded women from professional ensembles, reinforcing societal norms that music was an unsuitable pursuit and career for women. Women were encouraged to confine their musical activities to their private homes, where music was viewed as an acceptable domestic accomplishment rather than a professional or artistic vocation. Women who expressed aspirations beyond prescribed gender roles were frequently mocked or dismissed, thereby framing ambition and public visibility as unfeminine. Those restrictions not only curtailed opportunities for public performance, but also diminished women's access to recognition, training, and economic independence within the musical profession. Towards the end of the 19th century and into the 20th century, women grew frustrated with the widespread belief that professional careers, including those in music, were exclusively male domains. In response, they mobilized in the early 20th century, leading to the women's suffrage movement. Both the United Kingdom and the United States played significant roles in raising awareness of women's rights and advancing the campaigns, which ultimately led to the recognition and ratification of women's right to vote in 1920. Music helped communicate unifying ideas across the suffrage movement, either promoting or even discouraging the equality and freedom women sought. By 1907, suffragists were organizing marches, parades, and elaborate pageants that used dramatic scenes to highlight both the benefits of women's suffrage and the consequences of denying it. At these gatherings, music played a vital role in uniting and motivating women to persevere until they achieved success. Songs were often dedicated to prominent figures in the suffrage movement at both the national and local levels. Well-known activists such as Emmeline Pankhurst and Elizabeth Gurley Flynn were frequently referenced in lyrics, and many compositions were written in honor of or dedicated to influential women within the movement. Suffrage protest music can be divided into 3 genres: rally songs, songs of persuasion, and popular songs. Rally songs were regularly composed to familiar tunes or nationalistic melodies, so when the newly composed lyrics were passed around, people could easily join in because they already knew the melody. Familiar hymns were used, as many early suffrage leaders were also religious leaders. R. Sir J. Denisof, founder and editor of the Journal of Popular Music and Society, explains, "The utilization of popular or familiar tunes to which new lyrics are adapted places emphasis on the commonality of experience and speeds communication in terms of perceived social discontent." One melody used for rally songs with multiple sets of lyrics was the Battle Hymn of the Republic. The Battle Hymn of the Republic was originally a tune borrowed from an old Methodist hymn titled "Say Brothers, Will You Meet Us" by William Steff. The tune was sung by Union soldiers during the Civil War under the name John Brown's Body, and in 1862, dedicated female suffragist and the first president of the New England Women's Suffrage Association, Julia Ward Howe, wrote the famous lyrics we know today, titling the work Battle Hymn of the Republic. Howe sold her poem to the Atlantic Monthly for $5, and it appeared on the front page of the February issue of 1862. It was promptly reprinted in several newspapers thereafter and soon appeared in the Army hymn books. Howe had a lasting influence not only on the music of the suffrage movement, but also on American nationalist culture through the Battle Hymn of the Republic. The song rose to national recognition and continues to be one of the most recognized patriotic songs in United States history. The widespread adoption of Howe's Battle Hymn of the Republic into military band traditions highlights how her contributions entered and shaped a musical space historically dominated by men. The inclusion of Howe's text into the military hymn books meant that her voice and ideals were carried into performances that define national identity and patriotism, illustrating how a woman activist and suffragist influenced a core piece of wind band repertoire and the culture of the American people. Please enjoy an excerpt from the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Persuasion. These melodies prompted listeners to question or argue the suffragists' beliefs and explained why women wanted the right to vote. They often represented virtues of motherhood and the injustices of taxation without representation, proposing what the world might look like after women won the right to vote. The songs were written in moments of inspiration, reflecting the composers' personal lives and their reactions to the age in which they lived. Thus, the attitudes and prejudices of the songwriters and the social traditions were revealed through these persuasive songs. Recorded in 1958 by Folkway Records and sung by Elizabeth Knight, please enjoy this example of what one of these persuasive songs would have sounded like. You might even recognize the familiar melody.
Without debate
Songs of Persuasion as a logical argument song because they highlight the injustices suffragists endured and refute the anti-suffragist argument against women's suffrage. The final category, popular songs, gained momentum with the establishment of New York City music publishing business known as Tin Pan Alley. In the early 20th century, sheet music was being sold to the millions, and minstrel music and vaudeville spectaculars produced massive hits. Music publishers could ensure that every home has access to sheet music, thereby increasing awareness of suffrage songs and of women composers. Many songs sung by the masses were in the ragtime or show tune styles, so suffrage songs were considered popular because they reflected these musical forms. However, with all popularity comes criticism. Anti-suffrage songs also emerged that were derogatory towards suffragists, embodying stereotypical and prejudicial attitudes that were held towards the suffragettes. The more exposure women had to a male-dominated society, the more society had to say about them. For example, the song "Since My Margaret, Become a Suffragette" was published in 1913 by Jerome H. Remick and combined an anti-Italian immigrant bias with a mockery of the suffrage movement. The male character is now subject to his wife's domination after she learns about suffrage. He has to give her all of his money because she has assumed the role of the family treasurer, and he has to sleep alone with his monkey. Based upon the number of surviving copies, this song, unfortunately, was somewhat of a hit. Music played a crucial role in the suffrage movement on both sides of the argument. However, the wide variety of songs about female suffrage, both pro and against the movement, owes itself to the 75-year-long protracted struggle for the right to vote, and represents the voices of thousands of people who were part of this historical moment. From a few undaunted women in the 1840s and 1850s until the National American Women's Suffrage Association, 2 million members strong, carried the day to ratification of the 19th Amendment in 1920. Among the many women who used music to advance the suffrage cause, Ethel Smythe stands out as a composer whose work and activism powerfully united artistic achievement with political resistance. Smythe, an accomplished composer, conductor, and suffragist, helped open the door for women in the early 20th century, inspiring them to pursue careers as musicians. Smythe was already an established and respected musician before becoming involved in suffrage activism. She studied music in Germany, had her chamber works performed at the Gewandhaus in Leipzig, and made her orchestral debut at the Crystal Palace in London in 1890. Over her career, she composed 6 operas, and her second, Der Wald, was the first and only opera by a woman to be produced at the Metropolitan Opera in 1903. Unfortunately, it would be over a century before the Metropolitan Opera produced another opera by a woman. Kaija Saariaho's L'Amour de Loin, performed in 2016. After meeting Emmeline Pankhurst, one of the leading founders of the Women's Social and Political Union, or the WSPU, Ethel Smythe was inspired to fight for women's rights. And Smythe would use music to help unify and strengthen her beliefs. Smythe put her professional music projects on hold for 2 years, from 1910 to 1912, while she focused on political activism. However, she still found a way to contribute her craft to the suffrage movement with a trio of choral works called Songs of Sunrise. The first 2 pieces in the larger work, Laggard Down and 1910, are not widely known or performed, but the third piece, March of the Women, made history as the musical voice of the suffrage movement, becoming its true anthem. The published score is dedicated to Emmeline Pankhurst and the Women's Social and Political Union. And Pankhurst herself introduced the song to suffragists at a 1911 WSPU rally organized to welcome newly freed members back to the fighting line after 2 months' imprisonment. According to author Christopher St. John's biography of Smythe, a suffragette choir was drilled in the song by the composer for weeks before the January 21st performance at Pall Mall in London. Before the performance, Smythe spoke to the crowd, saying, "If I have contrived to get into my music anything of the spirit which makes this movement the finest thing I've ever known in my life, then perhaps the march may in some way be worthy of your acceptance. I think it is a most marvelous contribution to the fighting force. The poem was written after the music was composed, and that is about one of the most difficult things to do in this world. Please enjoy the March of the Women." Smythe was fighting for women's rights, she declined an invitation to represent women as composer and conductor at an international conference in Berlin in order to commit to the WSPU, which she considered essential to her integrity. She publicly responded, "All I know is that it was absolutely impossible to keep my self-respect without throwing my lot in with that of my colleagues in my union." In 1912, Smythe took part in militant suffrage protests, joining WSPU members in smashing the windows of anti-suffrage government officials. She was arrested after throwing a stone through the window of a cabinet minister and sentenced to prison. Legend has it that while incarcerated in Holloway Prison, she conducted the March of the Women from her cell using a toothbrush to a group of women suffragists singing in the prison yard. Ethel Smythe helped inspire many female musicians to show up and speak out. She was a pioneer in the women's suffrage movement, and history would not be the same without her fight and her use of music to help shape it. Most of her music has been lost over time, but a collection of her compositions still remain. Ethel Smythe arranged a chorale by Johann Sebastian Bach, Komm süßer Tag, as a part of her collection for voice, 5 sacred part songs based on chorale tunes. I arranged the chorale for brass choir as a part of a mission to promote her compositions and to add to the very small collection of women who have written music for brass ensemble. Please enjoy Ethel Smythe's Komm süßer Tag for brass octet. civil rights and public recognition, composer and bandleader Helen Mae Butler was opening doors for women in a heavily male-dominated military band. Butler's first conducting experience came in 1891 with the Talma Ladies Orchestra, an all-female brass band. It was reorganized as the U.S. Talma's Ladies Military Band, and soon the name was changed to Helen Mae Butler's Ladies Military Band. During 1910 to 1912, Butler's band gained distinction as the first American all-female professional brass band, a distinction that is especially important given that brass instruments were commonly associated with masculinity. The band toured the country and even attended several world fairs and expositions, offering music for the American people by American composers, played by American girls. Helen Mae Butler created professional pathways for women musicians and normalized women performing on masculine instruments. Butler's leadership of a professional all-female brass band inherently challenged the idea that women belonged only in private or domestic spaces. Military bands were symbols of national identity and patriotism, qualities typically associated with male hierarchy. By putting women visibly on stage and performing patriotic music traditionally associated with masculinity, she helped shift societal perceptions of women's capabilities and roles. While she wasn't an active suffragist, she still contributed to closing the gender gap and advocating for visibility, equality, and professional legitimacy in male-dominated spheres during the same time period as the suffrage movement. Butler's compositional output was small, but people referred to her as the female Sousa because of how well she integrated herself into the march genre through catchy, memorable, and patriotic melodies. John Philip Sousa was an advocate for Butler, allowing her to conduct his band and recognizing her as a professional, career-driven, and competent woman of her craft. Sousa's endorsement of Butler increased the advocacy and public visibility of women musicians, especially in the military, as suffragists sought women's right to vote. In 1995, Butler was inducted into the Women Band Directors International Hall of Fame, and her uniforms, sheet music, and other memorabilia are on display at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. One of Butler's most popular marches was Cosmopolitan America, which was written for the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis, and later selected by the Republican Party as the official march for Theodore Roosevelt's 1904 presidential campaign. It was played by bands all across the country, and people bought the sheet music to play it on their pianos at home. Like the suffrage songs, Cosmopolitan America includes familiar melodies that might help the audience latch on to what they're listening to. You might hear a familiar melody like Oh Christmas Tree, Eine kleine Nachtmusik, or even the Star Spangled Banner. Please enjoy Cosmopolitan America by Helen Mae Butler. Although more than a century has passed since the suffragists marched and demanded recognition, the questions that shaped their struggle have not disappeared. The doors that women like Ethel Smythe and Helen May Butler helped open only began the conversation about equity, and they require ongoing effort to keep the doors from closing again. While women are now visible in wind bands, conservatories, and on conducting podiums, visibility does not automatically equal equity. The suffrage movement demonstrated that music can reshape public opinion, but it also reminds us that progress is never automatic nor complete. If music can serve as a rallying cry for political inclusion, we must now ask, where do we stand today? And how can the wind band community continue the work of creating a more inclusive and equitable future? Musical advocacy and representation continue to resonate in the works of modern composers who draw inspiration from the history of women's activism. For example, Remembering the Remarkables by Grace Bauer was commissioned for the 100th anniversary of the women's suffrage movement and the passage of the 19th Amendment. It honors the extraordinary women who led and courageously fought for political representation while also drawing on the composer's personal experience of climbing a 14,000-foot mountain. While climbing the mountain, she realized that there are two triumphs: reaching the peak and making it safely back to the ground. Bauer uses the physical and emotional journey of a difficult climb, including false summits and setbacks, and the feeling of accomplishment as a metaphor for the suffragists' long and arduous fight for equality. Works such as these demonstrate that suffragist stories are not confined to history books. They continue to inspire composers to translate themes of justice, resilience, and equality into sound. Please enjoy Grace Bauer's Remembering the Remarkables. was not the only composer who has written music inspired by the suffrage movement. Nicole Piuno's Image on Truth reflects on the legacy of the suffrage movement by engaging more directly with historical narrative and identity. Commissioned for the same centennial, the work honors Sojourner Truth, an early suffragist and advocate for African American rights whose life and message were deeply rooted in spiritual faith. Truth was a powerful advocate for equality, even choosing the name Truth to reflect her beliefs. She died in 1883, never living to see the success of the suffrage movement or the realization of the rights she fought hard for. Nicole Piuno drew on this history as inspiration for her composition. Image on Truth ends as it does to reflect the unfinished nature of Truth's journey, symbolizing that she never witnessed the outcome of her efforts. Piuno continues to connect past and present by incorporating fragments of the Battle Hymn of the Republic and using the familiar melody as a unifying thread throughout the work. Through these musical and historical references, the composition not only commemorates the suffrage movement, but also reinforces the enduring impact of Truth's voice and the continued pursuit of justice and equality. Please enjoy Nicole Piuno's Image on Truth. musical advocacy, equity, and representation amongst women in the music profession has gradually improved, significant issues still exist. For example, women hold approximately 1 in 9, or roughly 11% of U.S. orchestra music director positions, according to 2023 reports, with the percentage dropping to 1 in 18, or 5.5% at larger top-tier orchestras. Female band directors are underrepresented in the U.S., comprising of roughly 11 to 15% of collegiate positions and 20 to 29% of high school positions, depending on the study. While women make up approximately 38.3% of music directors overall, they hold less than 6% of Division I athletic band director roles. In the past decade, however, the wind band community has begun to confront the underrepresentation more directly. Conferences, research presentations, clinics, and professional discussions increasingly address issues of gender equity in the profession, including conducting practices and repertoire selection. Ongoing initiatives, such as the Purple Baton Project by conductor Marin Alsop, aim to raise the visibility of women conductors and composers within the musical community. By encouraging ensembles to program works by women composers and to invite women clinicians and conductors, these programs address the imbalance that has historically shaped Western classical music while highlighting equality. Organizations such as the Women's Band Directors International, or the WBDI, have played a crucial role in creating networks of mentorship, advocacy, and professional development for women in the field. Founded in 1976, WBDI supports women band directors through scholarships, leadership training, and research initiatives that highlight the contributions of women in the wind band profession. I was fortunate enough to interview Dr. Courtney Snyder, Associate Director of Bands at the University of Michigan and past President of Women Band Directors International, about her experiences in the profession. Dr. Snyder spoke about WBDI's scholarship for female-identifying music students pursuing band director careers, as well as the composition competition to raise awareness of women composers. In my interview, we also discussed Dr. Snyder's activist concert, inspired by the women's suffrage movement, titled Let Women Choose Her Sphere, at the University of Michigan on December 8, 2021. The concert incorporated speeches and quotations from suffrage leaders and women rights activists, and it highlighted a diverse group of performers, including women, LGBTQIA+ individuals, and allies. The program consisted entirely of music written by women composers, including a world premiere by renowned composer Valerie Coleman called Let Women Choose Her Sphere. The concert was highly successful, leaving a strong impression on the audience and conveying a powerful message about the ongoing fight for equality. I believe Dr. Snyder's programming provides a compelling example of how band directors and conductors can engage with the legacy of the women's suffrage movement as an ongoing influence on artistic and educational practices. Recognizing these challenges raises an important question. How can educators actively cultivate more inclusive spaces within the wind band classroom and the broader musical community? Creating an inclusive environment begins with intentional pedagogical practices that affirm the identities and experiences of all students. Band directors serve not only as conductors, but also as mentors who shape how young musicians perceive their place within the musical world. Studies show that when students see diverse leadership on the podium, hear repertoire by composers of different genders and backgrounds, and experience classrooms that value collaboration and respect, they are more likely to envision themselves as future contributors to the profession. In my interview with Dr. Snyder, she stated that her ensembles have become more diverse in recent years, and as a result, there has been a stronger sense of inclusion in her classroom. In conclusion, the suffrage movement demonstrated that lasting change requires persistence, collaboration, and courage. While the wind band profession has made meaningful progress towards gender equity, the work remains unfinished. We can model our practices on the sustained advocacy advocacy and collective action of the suffragists by providing equitable accessibility and leadership opportunities to women musicians, demanding equitable pedagogical practices in the classroom, and intentionally programming diverse repertoire. By doing so, today's educators can ensure that the suffragist legacy continues to shape equality in the future of music education. The wind band community honors not only the female pioneers who demanded the right to be heard, but also the composers, performers, and educators who continue to transform that legacy into music for new generations. Thank you.